Welcome to the 7 Daily Nutrition Habits for a Better, Healthier Body with David Glover and Krista Schultz.
So why are we doing this? And both of us, Krista has a minor in nutrition, and I studied nutrition as part of my master's in exercise physiology. But on a more personal level, we both are very much interested, both as athletes as well as individuals. And was in Safeway. This was actually a few years back, but I was looking at the books they have there, and I realized, okay, all their books are on diet and nutrition. So I took a picture. And if I look at them, it's like, wow, there's all of them are saying something different. So how can you not be confused? I mean, it's just there's a lot of information out there. So just before we kind of dive into the meat of the presentation, just a few things we want to just introduce. So what is the definition of diet? And it's interesting because I think we sometimes we use both of these. So the first being the kinds of foods that a person habitually eats. For example, a vegetarian diet, a low-fat diet, a paleo diet. But it's also used, and I think in at least in my perspective, sort of a negative connotation is basically a type of restriction. So by going on a diet, I'm not doing certain things. So it's important to think, in terms of what we're talking about today is really more the first one. So what about the typical American diet? This is a quote from Dr. John Berardi. He runs Precision Nutrition. They do a lot of education around nutrition and review a lot of the research. But I love this quote. The standard American diet is composed of over 60% processed garbage. Nearly 90% of the carb-dense foods we consume are highly processed and mostly in the form of refined flour and sugar. So I know we have a lot of athletes on the call. So as a general rule, I mean, we tend to be healthier and also more educated. So what diet is the best diet? I mean, there's paleo, there's gluten-free, there's vegetarian, there's vegan, pescatarian, low-fat. Starting to see high-fat now, low-carb. So what's the best one? And I don't know if we can really answer that because it's probably going to depend on the individual. But so rather than focus on what is the best diet, we're going back to that first definition, when things that we eat. And so we want to look at more in terms of what we're talking about tonight is what our habits are. So what are the things we do day in, day out that we can do perhaps better? So maybe we don't have a perfect diet, but at least we can make better and more informed decisions. So we, after going back and forth with this, we've done this presentation over several years now. We've come up with a set of 7 habits, and they are these. And we'll go through each. As we go through these, we're going to give sort of our rationale. In most cases, we're going to reference. We've looked at research, and some of it's just going to be I think common sense. And then we're going to go through examples. So I know there's some questions about vegetarian and vegan. So we'll give some examples for each of these as well. And there's also requests for sample meal plans. Rather than cover that in the presentation, we can send out some examples via email afterwards. So the 7 nutrition habits, starting with number 1. Eat sugars around exercise. So a little background on sugars. Simple definition, they're short chain, sweet, insoluble, so I'm missing an L, carbohydrates. So glucose, fructose, sucrose, which is table sugar, maltodextrin, which is chains of glucose, are all examples. Characteristics, they're quickly digested and utilized by the body. So we talk about, that sugar high or sugar crash, getting an insulin response is typically sugar we're talking about. Interestingly enough, if you stimulate an insulin response by taking in sugar, so you're basically telling your body, I've got more sugar in my bloodstream, I need to do something with it. You're also suppressing the breakdown of fat. A key thing to note that when we talk about the muscles, so muscles burn calories, so they contract in order to cause movement, which allows us to swim, bike, and run, walk, strength train, everything. So the type of glucose, that is a immediate fuel source. So if you take in glucose in your bloodstream, or ingest it, it gets in your bloodstream, it can be easily taken up and used by the muscles. A key thing to note, if sugar is not used, it can be stored as fat.
Yeah, so today we did a interval workout on the bike, and we used heat and scratch labs in our water bottles, and then did a little run after. And the bike workout was pretty intense and needed more fuel right after, so did another bottle of heat, and that would be maltodextrin in that, and then dextrose, and I think sucrose, dextrose and sucrose in the scratch labs.
The one thing that it's actually gotten quite a bit of negative press and negative research lately is fructose, and fructose is basically fruit sugar, and so why it's bad. So it's just a little background. So it is metabolized by the liver. So I said before, glucose can be readily used by the muscles. If you take in fructose, it can't be immediately used. So it has to be processed by the liver and converted to glucose. It converts to fat at twice the rate of glucose. So what this means is, if you take in 2 grams of a gram, let me simplify this. If you take in a gram of fructose and a gram of glucose, twice as likely to convert that gram of fructose to fat. It doesn't provide fullness signals to the brain. So this is key. So what tells you when you're full? It could be physical discomfort. It could be that feeling of fullness. So something has to trigger that. And the interesting thing about fructose is it doesn't necessarily trigger that. So what that means is, even though technically you've taken in a bunch of calories, you may not be full, so you don't have that inhibition to stop. Some recent research has shown that high fructose diet can actually alter your brain's ability to learn and remember information. And then finally, related to point number 2, so it converts the rate at twice the fat, and so it's shown to actually increase abdominal fat.
Yeah, and recently I had a question about a protein powder product. Somebody asked me, and they sent me a screenshot of the ingredients, and fructose was in that protein powder, which was marketed as a no carbohydrate protein powder. So I thought it was interesting, but it's typically a cheaper sweetener. So some of the companies use that as something for taste, to make the product taste better. And then a couple products that I've seen in the sport that have it are, I think, the Power Bar drink that they use for Ironman on the course has fructose in it, and XL gels. So you can read your labels, but I've seen some athletes get some GI distress with products that have fructose. And it works fine for others, but something to consider.
Yeah, and again, it comes in from fruits, but we're saying fruits are still good for you, and there's a lot of other things in them. It's just the other things you have to look out for, and it's surprisingly, it's in a lot of sauces like barbecue sauce, salsa, ketchup. It's one of those things you pick up the jar and you're like, huh. You just don't even realize it's there.
So, one of the things that I think is very interesting and helps people make food choices is the reaction we get to eating these really tasty foods. So there's a picture of some Pez here. So if I eat something that has, a ton of sugar, simple sugar like fructose or, sucrose, it tastes good and I want more. And there's a reason for that. So, donuts or deep fried foods, like foods that really taste good and tell our brains that they're really good and we want more. And there's actually a chemical response. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it's a feel-good neurotransmitter. So when we eat these foods, we get a dopamine release. And once that dopamine starts to drop, we want more. So that's really interesting because they've seen the same thing in drug addicts, such as cocaine users, the same neurotransmitter increase and decrease, as well as people addicted to things such as video games. So it just stimulates this dopamine response. We want more. And if we aren't getting it, we might start to get have symptoms such as fatigue, depression, things like that, because our pleasure center needs that dopamine, the pleasure center of the brain. So that can cause, we talked about habits, and these are all habits. And, when we do these things, that neurotransmitter can cause these sort of addicting eating patterns to these types of foods that, aren't so good for us, the simple sugars and the trans fats and things like that.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the movie Super Size Me with Morgan Spurlock, it's actually a great example of this, showing how it actually happens. Still, I mean, we're not saying all sugars are bad, so they are still an important fuel source, especially for endurance athletes. And I know we have quite a few triathletes on the call, and I like to use this. I think it's a nice little example. If we look at the pie chart, shows an estimated energy storage for 70 kilograms, so roughly 160-pound male. If that person were to rely on energy stores in their body, where could they come from? So the big number there is fat, so roughly 70,000 calories. Proteins, 24,000, so another big amount of calories. We want to use fat. We don't want to use protein as a fuel source because we're talking our building blocks, a lot of our hormones. So if we're burning up protein, chances are it's because we're probably low on carbohydrates. And then the third fuel source is the smallest little sliver of the pie, and then it kind of expands on the right side as carbohydrates. So it's basically glucose or glycogen as it's stored that's already in your muscles. You have some in your liver, and there's some in your bloodstream. And what's interesting is, even though it's the least amount of calories available, it is the most accessible. So of those three, it's easiest for the body to break down. It can break it down versus both anaerobically as well as aerobically. So, if you've heard the term bonking, basically you're running low on carbohydrates. So, how we mitigate that is we take in sugars such as glucose and maltodextrin via our energy drinks, our gels, our blocks, our bars, so we can try and maintain some level of carbohydrates. We did a presentation 3 weeks ago, and I'll send out a link to that, but basically talking a little bit more about this and some guidelines for training and racing nutrition. So again, sugars are best consumed around exercise. Pre-exercise, we're basically filling up the fuel tank. During exercise, we're trying to maintain it so we don't run out. And then finally, post-exercise, we want to replace it. So the next time around, we don't start with a half-empty fuel tank. And, this is actually especially important for athletes. And, for triathlete, a lot of you are doing, 2 workouts a day, sometimes maybe even 3. It's important to not only replace carbohydrates day to day, but also from workout to workout. So if you're doing a swim immediately followed by a bike, it's not a bad idea to, take in something in between to replace what you lost in the swim prior to starting the bike. And this actually becomes a lot, or very, very critical as you start doing longer and longer races, like half Ironmans and Ironmans. So habit number 2, eat protein with every meal. And, this is actually one of one of the ones you don't see it talked about a lot, but it's actually probably one of the most significant things you can do. The key thing, there's a couple key reasons for this. One, they're more satisfying. So if you just go out and eat a bunch of sugar, it's not very filling. You're gonna get a sugar high and crash. With protein, it's gonna be more filling, and it also kind of reduces that insulin response, so you don't get that high spike in sugar and then crash. There's also a thermic effect. So when you're taking in proteins, because they're harder to break down, like fats, they actually take up energy. So you're burning calories to break down proteins. Reduced insulin response, again, so you don't get the sugars highs and lows. Enzymes and hormones related to metabolism. So it helps to regulate your metabolism. And it finally supports the immune system. So what are some examples? On the left, we've got some sort of the obvious examples, which are your meats and your fishes, in your protein powders, whey, and casein. On the right, we've got some examples for vegetarians and vegans: beans, eggs, cheese, Greek yogurt, nuts and seeds, and there's other types of protein powder, like pea protein.
Yeah, like David said, this is one of the best things you can probably do. I look at a lot of athletes' nutrition plans going into events and around training, and we even look at dinner the night before, breakfast in the morning. And the biggest thing I see lacking is, just maybe having a little bit of protein. I suggest, hard boiling some eggs, or, if you're vegan, tofu, or, something to help support your body's protein synthesis. And then even throughout the day. So post-workout, post-race, right after, and then every 2 hours after, really getting about 20 grams of protein. So calculating your protein needs by putting your body weight into kilograms. So if you take your body weight in pounds, divide by 2.2, so you get your body weight in kilograms, and then some guidelines here you can utilize. At the lowest end that I've ever seen for an athlete is 1.2 times your kilogram and body weight per day. So I had an athlete, we figured out the other day, we used 1.3 times kilogram of body weight, and she needed about 73 grams of protein per day. And when she took a look at her diet, she was taking in maybe about 50, some days less, some days a little more. But what we were noticing is she was losing weight, but also I think she was sacrificing a little bit of her power because her muscle mass was decreasing. So, we talked about it, came up with some good food choices. So I think if you figure out, at minimum what you need, if you're not getting that, slowly increase that through food choices, especially just taking a little bit of protein in with each meal.
Yeah, and I think there's some ranges here. I think the key thing here is a lot of it's going to depend on the volume of training and the intensity. So if you're doing shorter events, you may need less. If you're doing longer events, you may more intense events, you may need more. So a key point at the very bottom, an individual protein goal is difficult to establish. So there may be some trial and error too. So number 3, eat more fiber. So a couple good reasons: supports general health and chronic disease prevention, bowel movements more regular, and then the typical American diet consists only of 12 to 15 grams. And if you look below that, it talks about the National Academy of Science recommendations are actually a lot higher than that, to 38 grams for men and 25 for women. And when we talk about any of these foods today, we're really talking about the foods themselves. So, there are fiber supplements out there, but ideally, if you can get stuff from an actual food, that's going to be your better option. And in a lot of cases, it's probably going to be less expensive too. So example fibers, so water soluble. So these would be, you can read through the list, but a lot of different options. And and when you think of fiber, a lot of times we think of like, lentils and beans and stuff, but, vegetables and fruits are also a great source of fiber. Nuts, um, you know, beets, so lots of different examples out there.
Yeah, and I encourage people, just like with their protein needs, to sort of add up how much fiber they get each day. And you'd be surprised. I get a lot of people to do that with their, food diaries, if they kind of keep track of their foods for me. And we add up the fiber, and a lot of times they're not going to the bathroom regularly because, maybe they're only getting half of their fiber needs on certain days. So every day you want to make sure you get in, if you're not getting 25 grams of fiber, it's going to, be it's such a problem for your body, for your colon, for your digestive system. So we really want to make sure we're getting in these foods and getting enough of these. And like David said, if you have to revert to a fiber pill, that's fine as long as you're getting enough fiber from the foods. But most of the time you won't, I think people won't need that if they get enough from, the actual whole food.
Habit number 4, choose your fats wisely. So, sort of like sugar, there's a lot of press around fats, and, and with, I feel like, over time, America, broadly speaking, goes through trends of different types of diets. And when for a while it was low fat and, low carb and paleo, and now, I think we're starting to see, high fat diets. Um, so we talk about fats. It's sort of like sugar. So like sugars, not all fats are created equal. We can kind of group them into 4 broad categories, and the first 2 tend to be your better fats. The third one is going to be your animal fats. Coconut oil, which is saturated, actually has shown is it's a medium chain triglyceride. It actually can be a fuel source, more readily available fuel source. And then the last trans fats are the ones you really want to avoid. And these are your hydrogenated fats. So they're typically some type of fat that's been processed. It gives the product a long shelf life. So products, microwave popcorn, frozen pizza, coffee creamer, any type of baked goods, margarine, fried foods. And there's been talk about the FDA banning. I just did a Google search this evening to see if anything's been updated. I couldn't find anything. I think it was back in 2013. There was some discussion around it. And we're going to talk just, again, so here's some examples of each. The first 2 are going to be your better choices. Your third, a little bit's going to be okay, and the fourth one, the trans fats, what you want to avoid. One of the types of fats that's also you tend to hear a lot about are your omega-3 and 6 fatty acids. And I always found this interesting. If you look at our diets today on the right versus what our ancestors may have eaten, it's become very skewed. So we've gone away from sort of a balance of omega-3, omega-6 to more omega-6s. And we see omega-6s in corn products, so corn oil, which is a very common oil used in a lot of foods. So benefits to boosting omega-3s. So these are some benefits, and there's still a lot of debate around these, and there's been talk about them, the omega-3s. Again, this is the one we're getting less of relative to the omega-6s. There's been some debate around whether or not they reduce, heart problems like heart disease. But they're even putting that aside, there's potentially some other benefits. They tend to lower inflammation. Omega-6s tend to increase inflammation. And I actually noticed this myself when I was eating. I eat I was working out a lot, I eat a lot of like, tortilla chips and salsa. I would just be sore. My legs would be sore all the time, and my belief was it was because I was taking in too many omega-6s, which tend to be more inflammatory. Potentially decreases LDLs, increases blood vessel dilation, increase free fatty acids burning, may enhance mood, and may protect the brain. So again, there's still some debate around these, but I think the key thing is shifting your diet. It probably makes sense to shift our diets away from dominantly omega-6s to more omega-3s. Some example foods. So I've got salmon, sardines, so any type of sea fish tends to be higher in omega-3s, and it has to do with because they eat sea plants, which are high in omega-3s. So I found that kind of interesting. And there's different forms of omega-3s. So the fish oils tend to be a little bit different than the seeds. So it's not a bad idea to get a mix. Grass-fed beef also tends to be high in vegetables like Brussels sprouts and cauliflower, soybeans, tofu, raspberries, strawberries, and then any type of egg, cheese, or milk, especially if it's coming from a grass-fed animal.
Yeah, and you can sprinkle like flax seeds or chia or mila seeds in your salads, mix them in your, recovery shakes. There's a lot of easy ways to get those into your diet.
Habit number 5, read the food label. So this kind of ties together the first 4 habits in terms of taking the time to actually look at what you eat. And I found this online. If it's in sort of a nice little explanation of what the different blocks are. We threw out some grams, especially for proteins. So this is where you can actually go and see, okay, this is an example, so it doesn't of a blank label, so it doesn't show protein, but you'll see here like how many grams of protein. You look at carbohydrates, so how many grams of that is fiber, which is good, versus sugar, which may or may not be good. So again, if you're getting ready to do exercise and you need the fuel, then sugar is good. But if you're at home at night and getting ready to go to bed, eating a lot of sugar is probably not a great idea because your body doesn't have any place to use it, so it's going to store it as fat. So some key things here, and again, the calorie amounts are going to be relative to you. They give the 2,000, 2,500. I know as a 165, 170 pound male, if I'm training 10 to 15 hours a week, my calorie count might be 4,000 to 5,000. So so it tends to be different than what this is, but it will change too if I'm not training as much.
Yeah, and a big thing to look at is ingredients and food sources. So, where are these carbohydrates, proteins, fats coming from, and the amounts, of course.
Yeah, and it actually breaks down. It's nice. It breaks down the types of fats. So we said stay away from the trans fats, and maybe skew the saturated fats to the lower end. Yeah, so there's a lot of good information, and it's I even knowing a lot of foods, I still went to Trader Joe's today to pick up cereal. I picked up the box to look and say, okay, this is okay. This is a low fat cereal, so so where are the calories coming from? They're coming from sugar. So in case I put that one down and went for one that had a little bit less sugar.
Yeah, so when they list the ingredients, that first ingredient that contains the most of that ingredient, and then it goes down from there. And if you find that there's several ingredients you really can't identify, a lot of times I try to look them up or just not get the product, because if you don't know what's in it, then you're not really sure how it's affecting your body. And a lot of times high fructose corn syrup, we're talking about not fructose from fruit, but this modified version of fructose that they put in foods, has different names. So if it sounds like a sugar and it's in there in high amounts and it tastes really good, and it could be a poor product for you.
Number 6, snack the odds in your favor. And this is the big thing. Really comes down to what you have at home and what you keep available. And if you're at work, do you have a snack with you, or do you have to go to the vending machine? And as health conscious as I am, and I still, if I'm at work and I don't have a snack other than what's in the candy bowl, and I'm hungry, I'll go for the candy bowl. So really, this is about, what are things you can do on the front end so that when you're faced with, snacking or eating, that you can be successful. So what are some of these things you can do? So plan ahead, keep healthy snacks nearby. So again, going to work, if I know I'm going to be at the office all day, I'll pack some snacks. I might bring, an apple. I might bring some nuts, hard-boiled egg. Um, even there's some great, bars out there now that, are natural. Some of them, high protein, depending on what you want to eat. Keep snacks simple. Again, so you want to stay away from that processed food. So most of what you get out of the vending machine is going to be processed. So what are things you can have with you that will, give you that feeling of fullness without, basically putting a lot of crap in your body. Shop on the outer edges of the store. Um, depends on the store, of course, but you tend to find more, your fruits and your vegetables, your fish. You can get lean meat, and inside is where you'll get more of the processed stuff. Avoid baked goods. So again, that's going to hit a couple areas. Your sugars. Chances are it might have trans fats, and then finally, sort of what we said before, if you might be tempted, don't buy it. So,
Yeah, so good protein bars. One of my favorites right now is the Epic bar, and if you like it, it's a meat-based bar, so like kind of like a beef jerky, but a softer bar, and it's from non-hormone treated lamb, beef, and then there's also bison. Those are very, very good sources of complete proteins. Um, and then, do you have any others that you like? There's
I
there's
know
several in the market.
there's somewhere out there. You really have to. So I mean, there'll be vegetarian options. You tend to have um, nuts or maybe some type of soy. I know Cliff Bars, just general Cliff Bars have soy in them, so they're going to have a little bit of protein. Um, I think, one, thinking of, great protein snacks, if you do eat meat, I mean, beef jerky is another one. It tends to be very low fat. Um, try and stay with it can have a lot of sugar, so you kind of have to look for that.
Yeah, but I mean, there's certain bars. There's bars that have soy proteins that GMO soy. Most soy in products now are genetically modified, so that's something to consider if that's you say natural or organic. But those Epic bars are great, and they're like what's the one I'm thinking of? There's a couple other that I really like. We'll kind of go over that at the
Email
end.
them out.
Yeah, well, I can look them up and we can go over them.
Okay. Do you want to talk about your protein shake?
Oh yeah, and another good source is actually just making a shake. So there's a couple shakes that I really like, and the whey protein is great. It's a milk-based protein, but it's nice because it's a complete protein. And I just put my own together. There's a website you can go to. I can also email that out. It's just whey protein, and then I put some enzymes in it to help break down that, milk protein and flavor it with stevia. You can do a chocolate flavor on the website or a vanilla flavor. So you can sort of manufacture your own protein powder, but I have a little formula that I really like that's worked for me. And then a brand on the market that I like, it's all vegetarian based. It's called Raw Protein, and they have a couple versions of it, but it's actually approved by not the FDA, the health, what is it called? It's Department of Agriculture, USDA approves that. So those ingredients in there actually, undergo a process of approval, and there's no genetically modified ingredients in that product, so that's raw protein. And then my custom mix, I can email that out if you'd like that. So that's a good option to bars, but the Epic bars are great, and there's another one I really like.
Yeah, and some of the bars, it's really, you're probably more likely to find the better ones at like a Whole Foods or sort of a natural food supermarket. I know the Epic bars. I ordered a bunch of them on Amazon. That was the best price I found.
So the other bar that I like, it's not if you don't like the meat-based bar, it's Kind, Kind, and there's a couple different like nut flavors, fruit flavors. So if you like that bar, the Kind bars are nice because there's not a whole lot of ingredients or processed things. That it's just really nice and clean. So those are probably my two, plus the protein powders: Kind, Epic, a whey protein, and then a nice raw protein powder.
Yeah, and so here's some examples. We kind of went through a list of, what are some common snacks on the left side, and what are some better options. And the key here is we're not talking about like, hey, don't eat these things. It's just, if you have the opportunity, there is something that might be a little bit better for you that will give you the benefit. So I think we put Balance Bar and Zone Bar.
Yeah, the reason I put like the Zone bars, the protein sources are soy and genetically modified soy, and then there's a lot of other ingredients in there that aren't, quote, natural, but it's same thing with the Balance bars. So when you look at bars, and there are some really good bars out there. I have clients, I just can't think of all the different names, but I have some
Lara bars.
Yeah, Lara bars are great. Raw Revolution actually has a bar. It's a little higher in fat, but it's got cashews and naturally occurring foods and not a whole lot of crap ingredients. So read those labels. If you have time, sometimes it takes a long time to go through that aisle, but taste is a factor. But we'd rather you make a shake than do like a Balance or Zone bar. Those things taste really good. I used to eat them, and then I kind of started doing more research on these ingredients. And the other thing with we talked about fructose in some of the protein powders. There's also a sugar, it's derived from potassium. It's, trying to think of what it's called, but it's hundreds of times sweeter than table sugar, than sucrose. And they're putting it in some of the protein powders to make it sweeter. It doesn't have calories, but the problem with it, your taste buds sort of change what they think sweet is. So things that normally taste sweet don't taste as sweet after, taking the protein powder with this sugar. So when you see sugars listed, I look them up, and then by default I start seeing more and more in products, and then realize why. Either they're cheap or they work well, they're marketable, people like the taste, things like that.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see if something's low fat, they're going to give you the flavor by adding more sugar or vice versa. So just be mindful. And finally, 7, measure what you want to manage. So this sort of ties everything together. And here's some example websites that you can use to basically look up foods, and as well as to track your own stuff as well. And there's a bunch of apps out there as well. But this is a great quote from Peter Drucker, who's a management guru. Is what's measured improves, and it's just being mindful and just keeping track of what you eat.
Yeah, so I was just talking with a client today, and we were working on her ability to lose body fat. So she wants to lose some weight. And one of the most effective things that I've seen that work for most people that want to lose weight, want to lose body fat, is to keep track of their calories. And the reason for that is just what Peter Drucker says, what we measure improves, and we have that accountability on ourselves, the amounts that we're eating. And you do want to consider your food choices and your balance, like all the habits we talked about. But my client I was talking with earlier, we were keeping track of calories. She was losing some weight, and she decided her friend had an app on her phone that she would just take pictures of the food and send them to me. So the app allows you to get feedback from, somebody, nutritionist, or, somebody that works with nutrition. And and she started doing that. The problem she had with that is she wasn't able to lose weight. Her food choices got a lot better though, so I did like the photos, but we reverted back to, keeping track of calories for a period of time so she could get in touch with, again, okay, what amounts do I need? How is this kind of factoring into my whole day when I eat this amount of food? How do I spread this out better? So these websites, I've used these before. There's, I think, other great phone apps, Fit Day, trying to think of the popular ones, but the Daily Plate, Food Diary, as long as it's um, repeatable, it doesn't have to be exact, and you're getting to the point where you're getting a measure and getting a good idea of the amounts. It's good, and they calculate the total calories, protein, fats, carbohydrates. In some cases, like Daily Plate will calculate vitamins and minerals, so that's kind of nice to know. And I utilize the USDA nutrient database to check foods when I'm doing when I'm assessing someone's, like food intake, or food journaling.
So again, the 7 daily nutrition habits. So just some final thoughts. Like you're doing today, educate yourself. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, and you may not even agree with everything we say. We've gone through a lot of stuff, and I know Krista and I go back and forth a lot. And what we think and what we believe evolves as well. Find social support. This is I have a friend of mine who's a client a few years back, and Ironman athlete, and he was having trouble with weight, and I was like, well, what are you eating? He's like, well, the problem is I go home, I'm hungry, and I open that box of Cheez-Its, and next thing I know, I eat the whole thing, and I'm like, wow, so like, okay, well, how do you not eat it? And, we talked about not having it at home, and he's like, well, the problem is, my wife buys it for me because she knows I like them. So that for him, that social support, sitting down with his wife and saying, hey, these are, things, I don't want you to buy, even though I like them. Like I'll do that. I'll, say the same thing to Krista. Like, I mean, I like beer, but I don't want to keep it around the house. So, if it's not in the house, I just, don't buy it for me. Get expert help as needed. So there's a lot of, especially, if you have a special diet or special dietary needs, you may need, to sit down with a specialist. And there's, a lot of nutritionists out there. If you're an athlete, I think it helps, if you find one that works with athletes. And then finally, do your best. I mean, none of us is perfect. And, I'd like to say that I follow these 100% to a T. I try to, but I still, I'll still go out to dinner and have pizza, every once in a while too.
Yeah, and I like that slide of, instead of eating this, eat this. So instead of a bag of chips, eat an apple. When you go to a restaurant, if there's not a lot of great choices and you're there, you just do your best. And a lot of clients ask me, like, I'm at the airport, what do I do? A lot of times I'll pack some snacks, but if they have sushi, or, a fresher food choice, beef jerky or something like that, it's nice. But you're just trying to do your best and prepare for these situations as much as you can.
So thank you. That concludes the formal presentation. I will send out a link to this presentation, both online in PDF format, as well as the recording. We did, like I said, we did 3 weeks ago. We did one on nutrition around racing and training. So sort of what you want to eat before, during, and after. We've done a couple more this year. One was on training for half and full Ironmans, and forget the other one, but yeah. Yeah, there's probably about 12 or 15 or so that we've done over the last few years, but definitely check those out. As we've got a bunch of other resources as well. Please, our contact information is here. Please, contact us with any questions. And if anybody has any more questions now via the chat window, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, so there was a question, I guess, about what types of protein powders we recommend. And, I have a custom mix. The complete proteins, the whey protein and the casein for athletes is a nice one as a replacement. And like a pea protein, or that raw protein that I like has a bunch of different proteins from different plant sources. So that's a nice one. But I think that pea protein was really popular for some reason. And again, you get, it's nice to have a lot of different sources if you're going to go the vegetable route of protein, because you get more sources from different things. But the milk protein, like they say, chocolate milk is a great recovery formula. Yeah, because it's got all of the, that full chain of amino acids that we need to replace, full protein source. So there are some vegetarians on the call here, and it was interesting. I've trained a couple vegans and vegetarians, and sometimes they end up, if they're training for the longer distances, needing to take in some meat just naturally, or wanting to, because some of those sources give them things they need, like heme iron from red meat and things like that. But I do know vegans and vegetarians that do well in the sport, and those vegans and vegetarians that do well are very mindful of the way they cook things, and they have a ton of different cool recipes. So what I would recommend, I don't think you're doing anything negatively for your body. I actually think it's very healthy to eat like that, as long as you're getting enough from the foods you're eating. So I think a good, shake is helpful, but getting a good cookbook for vegans or vegetarians and making a ton of stuff. Cheers from Brazil. Yes.
Thanks, Adriano. Yeah, and if feel free to drop off at any time, or just if you have questions, please ask them. We have a bunch of questions that came in when folks register, so we'll just try and run through as many of those as we can. But again, thank you for your time today. I know you all are busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this.
There's a question about eating smaller meals versus 3 normal ones. And one of the things you want to be careful of is that you're not constantly eating, so you do feel hunger, because we have hormones that help us tell us when we're hungry and when we're full. Ghrelin, there's a couple different actually types of the ghrelin in our body. It's the hormone that tells us we're hungry. So if we're constantly shutting that off and desensitizing that, then that could be a problem. So give yourself a break from eating, but fuel around your exercise. And I think 3 meals a day is nice, spread out with a couple snacks, especially if you're working out, protein replacement. We talked about, we had another webinar on hydration, nutrition around training and racing, and some products that were good to, to help you fuel around exercise. And Recoverate was a nice one made by Hammer that you could use as a snack almost, or a breakfast. But what I do in the mornings for a lot of athletes is tell them, switch your snack with your breakfast if you can't eat as much. So, just depending on your lifestyle, your schedule, that 3-meal plan is typically nice, with some snacks, a couple of good, choices around that, the protein powders, bars, or whole foods. Okay. Oh, and I'm sure that there was a question on somebody that wants to live a paleo lifestyle, but gets confused on how to incorporate that into training and racing. And I do have a lot of people that like the paleo products and don't necessarily follow it to the religion, but some of the food choices are great, the paleo recipes and cookbooks. So for endurance athletes, you may need to, we talked about sugar around exercise, so fueling as you need it around those workouts, before, during, and after, immediately. And then the paleo recipes and, different recommendations are nice other than around the exercise. And that's kind of what I've done for athletes that do long distances, and it seems to work really well. There's a question on meal timing and blood sugar effects of food groups. So meal timing is extremely important because, like we said, that first habit, taking in sugar around exercise, you can utilize the sugar to replace muscle glycogen. And if you do that, you're going to have more energy during your workout. Now, you don't necessarily need that sugar if you're not exercising or exercising intensely. So timing that right is important for your energy level and metabolizing that sugar. And I used to tell people, if you want something tasty like a dessert or some cupcake, maybe save it for after a really hard workout when your body can utilize that glycogen and restore it for energy. So rather than storing it as fat, it'll use it up. So timing is extremely important. And there was a question about fish oil. And I recommend, I've seen some of the research, and it's an omega-3, and that's what we're looking to increase. So we want to, eat more fish. The fish oil is a way to supplement that. If you do a fish oil, I recommend one that's mercury-free that you can refrigerate. It doesn't have that fishy taste. So, you can make your best judgments on that around the research. But if you are eating fish 3 times a week, and you're getting some of these other sources from omega-3s, I think you're going to decrease your inflammation and help your body based on the research. Again, the fish oil, there is some recent research out there, around that says it might not help the heart, but not necessarily that it's bad.
Yeah, and we also, we both take fish oil supplements and both try to eat fish probably 3 or 4 times a week at least.
Yeah, and we do have some example meal plans, so that's something we can email out. And if there is a question we didn't answer or something, a resource that you're looking for, you can always email us. Okay. Oh, why does weight plateau? So if your weight plateaus, there's some theories around that we have a set point weight, and our body kind of wants to revert back to that weight. But a lot of that is really based on your habits. So there's there's a lot of research on why we do the things the way we do them, and our brains have a lot to do with that. So we have this pattern in our life that we just, not even just subconsciously, eat the same way, do the same things. So to avoid getting stuck at a particular weight, I always start with food logging, because that gives us an idea of where you are, and you become a little bit more aware of what you're putting in your body. So you can sort of change that up in ways that spike your metabolism. There's some tricks of the trade that I use. different things for breakfast and snacking and meal timing. But most importantly is that you kind of figure out what you're doing. It's like keeping track of your workouts or developing a training plan. Just kind of lay it out for a few days and calculate what's going on.
Yeah, and sort of the other side. So to what you take in is what you burn. So what you're doing. So how does that balance out? And the term is energy balance. But if all else being the same, if you continue to eat the same, but you increase your output, say you walk an hour a day or do an extra hour exercise, um, that could potentially impact your weight, lower your weight as well.
Yeah, there was a question about dealing with elevated LDLs. So LDLs are low density lipoproteins, and the way I remember what those are is I think of lousy LDL. So those are the bad lipoproteins, so the bad fats that you want to lower. And one of the theories is that we can increase omega-3s. There's a couple of natural methods that I know some MDs are using. Certain herbs and things like that. I can't remember. I had a client, taking some medication and then had some other natural things recommended from the MD as well. So, so I think the biggest thing with lowering the LDLs is making sure eating, what we listed, the good fats, and also sort of calculating, really how much sugar are you getting? Because a lot of times we're finding, with some of this research is that taking in too much simple sugar can cause inflammation, and that inflammation can affect the arteries' ability to work well, and it does affect sometimes the lousy, low-density lipoproteins. So really just cleaning up the diet in general and consulting with your doctor, naturopath, or nutritionist on products or medications. And then the final question was again about weight loss, and someone that's eating healthy most of the time unable to lose weight. So if you want to lose 10 to 15 pounds and you're having trouble because you're making really good food choices, I suggest using one of those apps where you can log your foods and just calculate how much you're taking in. And, if you're not sure how much you really need, it's really best to start with what you're taking in, and then okay, I'm eating that much per day, I'm not losing weight, so let me cut back a little bit, spread it out, and use some trial and error. And there's some formulas I use, equations to figure out calories per day, and then kind of break it down into proteins, fats, carbohydrate needs. But I start a lot with what you're doing already and what's not working. So then we can take in maybe some of those amounts and look at what are the sources of those calories. So are you mostly getting sugar? Are you mostly getting fat? So, are you getting enough protein? And that also is something to take a look at with the food logging. So weight loss is a lot about, calculating what you're taking in versus, what you are burning and exactly what those things are, the specifics, proteins, fats, carbohydrates. And that's all of the questions. Does anybody else on the call have anything, specifically, sample meal plans? Yep. So do we have emails?
Yeah, we can email them.
Okay. So what we'll do is email out a sample meal plan for you. And if there's, just let us know if there's anything else. But I really appreciate you guys staying on and listening, to the answers to these questions and taking the time to tune in and listen to us.
Great. And yeah, thanks again, and have a good night.